Hello, and welcome to another broadcast of Comics Let's Talk. Kurt Russell, his enduring appeal in the world of comic books.
There is one other movie that we just finished filming that comes out in May of 2017.
What could that possibly be?
It's a little movie called Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. And finally, one more guy we have here for you tonight. He is one of my favorite people in the entire world. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Kurt Russell!
Snake Plisken in the house! Snake Plisken in the house! And then Kurt Russell, who I'm told you can't really say much about what you're doing in this film. Is that true?
It's great to come here to Comic-Con. You guys are blessed. But for me personally, this is great because I had no idea that these girls out of costume were as fantastically beautiful as they are. It's incredible that we were around this all the time, and I had no idea. My guy I think James wrote a great character. I was really honored to have the opportunity to play it. It's a great thing when you get the chance to play characters that hopefully you will make memorable. And if you can make a few in your lifetime, that's great. And I hope that this one is. I had a great time with these guys. They're fantastic.
You're the best person in the world. Why the hell don't you run for president, Kurt Russell? You made amazing...
I want to see that betting progress go somewhere.
Kurt Russell has made a major comeback. His portrayal of Ego in Guardians of the Galaxy 2 garnered rave reviews. Russell himself is a great addition to the ensemble, according to the New York Observer. And the casting of Russell is pure genius, said the Reno News and Reviews. Plus his turn as Mr. Nobody in the Fast and Furious franchise, which isn't really a comic book franchise, but it should become one, and I think it will be one soon, given the popularity of 8 films that have been released. Those portrayals endear him to modern-day fanboys. Kurt Russell's first appearance in a production that was based on a comic book was 1962's Dennis the Menace, in the episode Wilson's Second Childhood. He also appeared on television shows like Man from U.N.C.L.E. in 1964. The Man from U.N.C.L.E. was adapted into comic book format by Gold Key Comics. Millennium Publications also adapted Man from U.N.C.L.E. stories in the Birds of Prey affair. Also, DC did a Batman 66 meets the Man from U.N.C.L.E. In 1965, he appeared on Gilligan's Island as Gilligan meets Jungle Boy. Then in 1966, he appeared in an episode of Lost in Space. The March 1966 episode of CBS's Lost in Space was entitled The Challenge, and he played Quano, the son of a planetary ruler and Edward's son in Follow Me Boys. So those were appearances on television. Actually, Lost in Space was a Gold Key comic book at the time, but it was not based on the Irwin Allen television series. That's the interesting thing. When I was a kid, I remember watching the show and then going to pick up a comic book in the store. And when I read it, it's like, these aren't the people on the TV show. Who are these people? Who's Craig Robinson? I'm used to John Robinson. And the kids were Tim and Tam, and there was no Bleep, and there was no Robot, there was no Dr. Smith. I didn't know what was going on. Turns out that the Gold Key comic book, Space Family Robinson, Lost in Space, came out before the TV series and featured a different cast of characters. Gold Key thought about suing Irwin Allen, but thought better of it because if they sued, they might have lost the rights to do comic book versions of Irwin Allen Productions, which they had done different movies, other TV series like Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. So if they had sued, they might have lost the rights. So they came to a mutual agreement, and as the comic book show wore on, the characters began to resemble the television characters, though they were still called Craig Robinson, Tim and Tam, and the other names of the characters. And they did not introduce Dr. Smith or the Robot or any other stuff from the television series. However, Innovation Comics did a Lost in Space that was based on the television series, and Billy Mumy was directly involved in production and writing many of the scripts for that comic book. But the question is, when was the first time that Kurt Russell himself, a character that he played, appeared in a comic book. Was it Escape from New York? Was it one of the Disney films which had been adapted into comics and comic book digests? Well, actually, the answer is we have to go back to 1963. After he did Dennis the Menace, he did a short-lived television series where he played a Tom Sawyer-like protagonist called The Travels of Jamie McPheeters. The Travels of Jamie McPheeters is a Pulitzer Prize-winning novel written by Robert Louis Taylor. It was later made into the short-running television series on ABC from September 1963 through March 1964. The Travels of Jamie McPheeters was adapted into comic book format by Gold Key Comics. Kurt Russell got reviews as Jamie. Dana Irely played his father, and Michael Whitney and Charles Bronson played the Wagon Masters, Buck Coulter and Link Murdoch, respectively. The program faced stiff competition on CBS at 7:30 Eastern on Sundays from My Favorite Martian and the first half of The Ed Sullivan Show. NBC was airing Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color at the same time slot, so with that competition, the show quietly died after 26 episodes. However, after the series was canceled, Kurt Russell and Charles Bronson reprised the roles of Jamie McPheeters and Link Murdoch in the 1964 theatrical movie called Guns of Diablo, which is an expanded color version of the series' final episode, Day of Reckoning, March 15, 1964. Russ Conway appeared in the film as Doc McPheeters, replacing Dana Irely in new sequences. The show also starred Susan Oliver, a popular character actress on television who did the Star Trek pilot, in which she played the green Orion slave girl in The Cage, later broadcast as the two-part Menagerie on NBC. So that episode brings us into the world of feature films. And what did Kurt Russell do for feature films? What was his leap after Guns of Diablo into the world of feature films? Well, he started doing Walt Disney movies, one after the other. And a lot of those plots adapted into comic books and comic book digests, and had plots very similar to what you would see in a superhero comic book. For instance, in the first of the Dexter Riley trilogy, The Computer Wore Tennis Shoes, after installing a computer part in a thunderstorm, lightning strikes him and he becomes a human computer, and The Strongest Man in the World, which came out in 1975. Other films in the Dexter Riley trilogy included Now You See Him, Now You Don't, where he becomes invisible in 1972. The plots are very comic book-like, and some of those movies have been adapted into comics digests. In 1968, the one and only original Family Band came out, which is interesting because it was the first pairing of Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn in a feature film. And of course, they would go on to develop a relationship later on in life. And then came 1971's The Barefoot Executive. 10 years after that, in 1981, came the role for which he's probably best known, Snake Plisken in Escape from New York.
New York, 1997. The entire city is a walled maximum security prison. The bridges are mined. The rivers are patrolled. And the United States Police Force has everything under control.
Down. I'm going in.
John Carpenter's Escape from New York, the high adventure of the future. One man must go in where no man has ever gotten out.
He did his best Clint Eastwood impersonation, and thus they pitted him against the old Clint Eastwood spaghetti westerns villain, Lee Van Cleef. In the world of comics, Snake Plisken was adapted by Marvel Comics in the one-shot Adventures of Snake Plisken in 1997. CrossGen did a 4-part Chronicles of Snake Plisken, which was the first time one Kurt Russell character was paired with another Kurt Russell character, as Snake Plisken met Captain Ron. In 2014, Boom Comics acquired the rights to the Snake Plisken franchise. In 1982, John Carpenter's The Thing came out, and it was later adapted into comic book format with original stories from Dark Horse Comics, The Thing from Another World, Climate of Fear, Eternal Vows, Questionable Research. Also, The Northern Nightmare, and Clark's World magazine came out with The Things for your reading pleasure. In 1986, John Carpenter brought us Big Trouble in Little China.
This is Jack Burton in the Pork Chop Express, and I'm talking to whoever's listening out there. It's a pretty amazing planet we live on here, and a man would have to be some kind of fool to think we're all alone in this universe.
There is a hidden world where ancient evil weaves a modern mystery.
What's going on here? Is this some kind of
Magic. The darkest magic.
They call it Little China.
Finally, we shall bring order out of chaos.
It's where Big Trouble was waiting for Jack Burton.
Who? Jack Burton. Me.
Jack?
Jack?
Jack!
They told him to go to hell.
You make one move.
And that's just where he's going.
Somebody, I don't care who, tell me what is going on.
How are you gonna spring us?
I have no idea. There are many mysteries, many unanswerable questions, even in a life as short as yours.
My destiny rests in your capable hands.
Hey, I'll do my best.
Oh God, is this really happening?
This is gonna take Cracker Jack timing, Wang. 1, 2, 3. We may be trapped.
Boom Studios adapted the cult classic in 2014. And the interesting thing about the John Carpenter films is that most of them were not successful in their initial run, especially the ones that were adapted into comic book format with Kurt Russell. But they become cult classics. And they're planning on doing a new comic book series called Old Man Jack, where Jack Burton comes out of retirement, and it was written by John Carpenter and Anthony Burke. Stargate came out in 1994, which of course was turned into a television series and made into a comic book. Now the comic book version takes its cue from the television series versions of the characters. However, if it wasn't for the movie, there would be no television series and be no comic book series, so we have to include that here in this discussion. Also in 1996, we had Escape from LA, the sequel to Escape from New York, which had mixed to poor reviews, and the special effects were lacking. That much is for sure. Then came 1998 Soldier, which is in the Blade Runner universe, and in 2005, the comic book movie Sky High, where he played Steve Stronghold. Some little comedy, kind of a mix between teen comedies and superhero movies. Sky High received generally favorable reviews based on review aggregator Rotten Tomatoes. The film earned a fresh rating of 73%, positive reviews, 93 positive, 34 negative. The site's critical consensus read, "This highly derivative superhero coming-of-age flick is moderately entertaining, family-friendly fluff. Commercially, it was a success." And that's a look at Kurt Russell's appearances in movies and television series which were either based on comic books or became comic books later on down the road. So as we've discussed, Kurt Russell made a big comeback in the world of comic book movies by playing Ego in Guardians of the Galaxy, and he also made a big comeback in the world of comic books last year. As I was researching the best-selling comic books of 2016, I was surprised to find Snake Plisken meets Jack Burton, Escape from New York, and Big Trouble in Little China. And I was thinking of that. What would make a good sequel to that comic book series? How about a crossover with Boom and Dark Horse? And they bring McCready on board. After all, we did not see MacReady die. In fact, in the documentary, terror takes shape on the DVD while they had Russell available. Carpenter agreed and shot a scene in which MacReady had been rescued and administered a blood test, proving that he is still human. The alternate ending with MacReady, definitely proven to be human, has yet to be released. So that's a brief history of Kurt Russell's appearances in comic book-related productions on both television and in the world of film. He has the #2 superhero movie of the summer of 2017 in Guardians of the Galaxy, and he has the #1 selling comic book from Boom Studios. 2 of his characters, Snake Plisken, Jack Burton from Escape from New York, and Big Trouble in Little China. And that's all the time we have for this program. I hope you enjoyed this little trivia on Kurt Russell's appearances in the world of comic books. Come on and join me next week. We'll have another broadcast of comics. Let's talk. I also have my own franchise now. It's Carl Vincent Vampire Hunter. The first novel was Last Rites, The Return of Sebastian Vasilis. It has been adapted into comic book format and can be found on Indie Planet along with all the other Carl Vincent Vampire Hunter comic books. It's also being made into a movie out of Lakeland, Florida through Crisp Filmworks. Check out the Facebook page, Carl Vincent Vampire Hunter. Also, Last Rites, The Return of Sebastian Vasilis. If you like what you see and want to stay up to date, just click like on both pages. There are many other comic books available on Indie Planet and Drive-Thru Comic Books of the Carl Vincent Vampire Hunter franchise. The latest comic book is Dracula Rising. We're on issue 2. Issue 1 was drawn by Dennis Magnant, who since had to move on to other projects. So my new artist is Rodolfo Ezequiel. Going to show you some panels from his artwork right now. Rodolfo is an excellent artist, and these are panels that he has drawn for the Dracula Rising #2 issue. There's also an animated trailer out. Let's take a look at a little bit of the animated trailer.
Who are you? Your worst nightmare.
I think you dropped these.
Thanks.
You're not very good at this, are you?
I'm Carl Vincent.
Another vampire hunter wannabe. Do you know how many of you that I've killed? You can't leave yet. The party's just begun.
I hope to use this trailer to sell the project to maybe Adult Swim or Cartoon Network or something like that. Until next week, this is Kevin Gibbon saying so long and keep reading those comics.
Hey kid, how would you like to kick me in the shin?
How would I like to kick you in the shin?
Huh?
Mister, are you drunk?
No kidding. I'll tell you what. If you kick me in the shin real hard, I'll give you a quarter. Okay, go ahead, play it. Ah! It's a good one, boy.